Hello and welcome everyone. If you are new or haven't yet done so, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. On this video we discuss all things prepping and getting yourself ready for what is coming. As things in the wider geopolitical realm are moving at a staggering pace, a lot of my more recent videos, and this one too, will have large news components. This is because to prepare effectively you need to know what is going on, so you can provision yourself accordingly. Firstly, I need to say though, that I do not give financial advice on this channel. Everything I say here is taken from my interpretation of the things I have studied, and you should always do your own research to confirm or disprove anything, and multiple data points are important. As I am a New Zealander, I tend to also like to focus on our country for at least a little bit of each video. No matter how irate I seem and disgusted by what is being passed by the current technocratic dictatorship we have, I do not condone, support or incite any form of dissent, rebellion or riot or violence, although I believe in the right to protest and I believe it is necessary. Most of what I say is based on my opinions, and my opinions are not an attack on yours. If you think they are, please take a step back and realize you have your perspective and I have mine. And although we may not see eye to eye all the time, we probably both should try to understand and accept each other's opinions and realize the society-wide indoctrination or large propaganda agenda has shaped your mind for the better or for the worse, depending on how relentless the propaganda has been in your location. I know from experience that the Americans and the Chinese both have very strong patriotic indoctrination training during their formative years, and this tends to lead to a confrontation more easily than in other places. If you are watching me from the USA or from China, you'll know what I mean. You know you have to watch your words, and they can very quickly get you in trouble or even killed in some parts. And for those in China, you just mention anything negative about their government or system, or if Taiwan and Hong Kong are parts of China or not, and you will see the flashed anger rise faster than a sailor on shore leave day. Alright, so without any more delay or disclaimers, let's get into today's content. Today we're going to start with New Zealand. And a lot has happened. At the end of the last video I talked about how the government plans to follow through the World Economic Forum's Great Reset agenda, which means the rewilding of what is already a very wild countryside, the starvation of perhaps millions even in such sparsely populated landmass such as we have here in New Zealand, even with our annual growth rate of 0.2% year on year. So what did they do? Well, they put a plan of action in which will lead to a 20% drop in animal agriculture. This was the subject and cause for the protests we had here over a week ago. It seems that while they were covered on the local news, they got things wrong and the coverage was biased. It almost seemed as though they wanted to sow more division by funding counter-protests on the same day and having the media cover the counter-protests more fully. So let's get specific here. Firstly, I want to bring to your attention something that has been pushed through and rolled out without a word of protest. The renaming of all government-affiliated industries, from schools to universities to local governance to laws themselves, they are all being renamed. Now, when I say the Emissions Trading Scheme, or ETS for short, and the agricultural tax, you know what I mean. But when I say He Waka Eke Noa, do you know what that is? Well, that is part of this new co-governance with the Maori that is being rammed down our throats. In fact, it is the Primary Sector Climate Action Partnership. It is what they are calling a partnership between industry, Maori and government. So, for my friends in the meat industry, where I worked as a fresh out of school young'un, New Zealand Beef and Lamb, the Meat Industry Association, Dairy, Deer, Federated Farmers, Horticulture New Zealand, Irrigation New Zealand, the bloody Ministry for Primary Industries, all have been rolled up, herded, corralled, penned in by this He Waka Eke Noa. That is now dictating and imposing regulation that supersedes all they have accomplished with your support years past. One Maori-named organisation to govern them all, and in the darkness bind them and lead them to the slaughter, literally. So, it's not quite that simple though. Yes, the He Waka Eke Noa is proposing to tax all farmers on their emissions, and not just animal farmers, all farmers, growers included, and poultry too. If you have more than a few sheep, deer, cows, pigs or chickens, and if you use fertilizer over a certain amount, you will be taxed for it. Now, we the public are already taxed for this, so not only do we have an income tax rate of around 30% mostly, there is also 15% more on top of everything in the form of GST, goods and services tax for those unaware, and even more on fuel. I ask, do you think we're getting value for the money? He Waka Eke Noa is proposing to place these taxes on the farmers, but by using a calculator system that takes into account riparian planting and sequestration of carbon due to trees, not all trees, just new planting, but your grass doesn't count, etc. So it would be harsh for farmers, and I say, but here, and I can't emphasize this enough, whatever is done to farmers will end up on the producer's price index, and then it will come to you in the form of your grocery store. This is not a tax on farmers, it's a tax on everyone. It is no different to an additional GST increase, except it will stack with GST and be applied across the board. Now, just to drive the point in further, right through your wallet and out the side, the government is not currently willing to accept He Waka Eke Noa's proposed scheme, opting instead to apply a blanket per animal emissions tax, as well as fertilizers, etc., that are in fact far worse than the proposed one, which will already cause chaos in staple prices. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a direct attack on your ability to feed your family. This will lead to farmers selling up and going out of business, or just flat out raising prices 50% or more and reducing livestock and oil production by more than 20%. You have to acknowledge that these farmers have debts too. They are hit from both sides. They will have to sell land, livestock, not buy new tractors. The list goes on, and you being able to buy any meat or produce is severely at risk. This is the kind of legislation that leads to outright revolt, and quite frankly, it should. Now, if that wasn't dramatic enough, wait to hear what I have to tell you next. Given the effects of this will be implemented before 2025, you may think it's okay, and we can vote the government out before then, right? Wrong. Last night I received an email from a supplier of food. This is the company that supplies food to your local eateries, not the local supermarkets, but the big box bulk store food place. But what happens commercially happens locally, right? Under the new Layer Hens Code of Welfare, which can be found on the MPI or Ministry for Primary Industries website here in New Zealand, farmers must stop producing eggs from caged hens by the end of this year. Colony raised eggs will also end by year 2027, which means the only eggs you can get are free range eggs, which take more land and resources to produce, and which will then be the subject to emissions trading scheme also. What all this means for you is less animal products in any form, and what you can get will be far more expensive. Imagine, if you will, that you are in a pen, and now that your pen is your house, and you get a certain quantity of food per day per person, and currently it includes meat or fresh vegetables every day. Now, the effect of these regulations will have on that quantity of food will mean that meat or fresh vegetables will be only allowed 1 or 2 days a week, and 2 days a week you'll eat nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, Welcome to the dystopia of the 21st century. Okay, so let's just take a quick glance at the rest of what shit things have been put in place or proposed by this government while you've been being distracted. So yes, there is the emissions trading scheme and the agricultural emissions farming tax or emissions tax that we just covered. The significant natural areas legislation, which I've discussed before, and its theft of private property and reclassification of protected lands. The national policy statement on fresh water, which will mean farms can be audited by the Resource Management Act for their plans to protect waterways, and essentially boils down to more centralized control and oversight without any benefit. The National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, which can be found under the Resource Management Act, but is easier to find by searching the underlined titles in this video transcript or subtitles. This works in conjunction with the New Zealand Natural Gas or Natural Areas Law to punish those who own land in New Zealand and have had the gall to go about creating habitats for wildlife to flourish on their land and could be classified as taonga or sacred to the Maori and must remain untouched. Even if you own it, it is theirs. When reading through this, it occurs to me that what is happening is that this government is creating essentially Maori iwi only oligarchs. There is the ute tax or clean car package. This one is self-explanatory but devious as all hell. So yes, it's a tax on polluting vehicles, namely utes for the Americans here. In New Zealand, we refer to pickup trucks as utes or utility vehicles, and large SUVs, sport utility vehicles. This puts an extra roughly $3,000 on a ute and takes up the same off an EV, electric vehicle. The problem with that is that the electric batteries don't last that long and are hard to recycle or dispose of, cost more in emissions to mine the raw materials than the use of the diesel or petrol would have, and essentially are trying to be used in a country that has long roads not suited to electric vehicles and low power generation to boot, as well as high prices for electricity that are going to go up due to more bureaucracy and demand. Next up, the Water Services Bill. Basically more regulation of those who don't use town water supply. It'll now be treated like a town's water supply, which means more red tape. The Crown Pastoral Land Reform Bill, which gives excessive regulation to the high country farmers, essentially forcing them off their land and out of business. Right, let's take a step back here. So why all of this? Why now? We are a relatively small player on the world emissions stage. We have good processes in place and a good conservation practices. Is this really about conservation, or is it about, yep, you guessed it, it's about money? If you want to read further into it or question the assertion that I'm about to make, I will direct you to the Climate Change Response Emissions Trading Reform Amendment Act of 2020, found on the legislation.govt.nz. In 2015, we signed on to a Paris climate policy with a section turnaround of every 5 years. In every 5-year block, we have to reduce emissions by a certain amount. We have to, but so does everybody else who signed on to this agreement. It looks like we were on target, but our government notices the loss of tax it will have by reducing production, and then it sets a propaganda campaign of Generation Less to encourage youth to do less, to produce less, and to consume less. But to offset the loss of tax, our government can auction off ETS units, or emissions trading scheme units. It can sell your carbon reduction to another country that hasn't met its reduction quota and put that money in a Crown holding account. So just like it's selling land to be turned into pine forest, it's now reducing the gross product of the country, reducing your food, making it more expensive for you to live, and doing an economic hit job on ourselves and our farmers to sell New Zealand emission trading units to both individuals and companies and countries. Ladies and gentlemen, environmental social governance at its best. I say again, welcome to the dystopia of the 21st century. Before we leave this New Zealand-based content and look into elsewhere in the world, we will look at one final piece of the puzzle. It has been revealed via a story on NewsHub that this government wants to extend the COVID-19 restriction powers it gave itself to lock you down until 2025. I don't have much more to say to this except I told you so. They will never give up these powers. We have to live with this dictatorship or crush it. In Parliament today, they are pushing through a digital identities program which will track you and everything you do online and paves the way towards us being one of the first countries to go digital money with a CBDC or central bank digital currency and cashless society. Privacy rights are going out the window. Next, it will be your digital wallet which will have smart contracts and carbon allowances physically preventing you from buying more meat than you need for a week. I say again, welcome to the dystopia of the 21st century. Next up, we are going to talk briefly about the COVID vaccine. On the 13th of October, a spokeswoman for Pfizer admitted that its vaccine that was rolled out under emergency use protocols and mandated here was never tested on its ability to prevent transmission of COVID-19. And so the widely used claim that you get the vaccine to protect the vulnerable and elderly was complete bullshit. So leading up to election cycle next year here in New Zealand, I'd like you to remember that this government mandated a vaccine against the pain of losing your job that was untested and now proven to have quite severe side effects for some, most notably young men who are at increased risk of death through myocarditis than they would have been should they not have taken the vaccine and managed to avoid catching the virus. For those of you not in New Zealand who are watching my videos, I want to ask you, and please comment, what have you seen happening in your area? Okay, so let's move over and take a look at what is happening overseas. Let's start with the war in Ukraine and Russia. In the last video, we had just had an attack on the main bridge into Crimea and out of Crimea heading to and from Russia. Russia has blamed this attack on Ukraine and has made several arrests. It is believed the man who drove the truck that was detonated was a civilian and did not know where the bomb in his truck. I believe this was likely done by organizations like the UK or the USA Special Forces, but I don't have any proof of that, so take that with a grain of salt. In retaliation for this, Russia in the space of one morning destroyed and knocked out over 30% of all power in Ukraine. They could have done that at any point, but they want to take Ukraine back and incorporate it into Russia. They don't want to destroy it. They want the region's land, resources and productive population. They're not there to destroy, they're there to reincorporate it back into Russia. There are some simple facts here. In exchange for the breakup of the USSR in 1991, NATO promised it would not expand towards Russia. It lied and expanded and encircled Russia and now China too, and caused this very war directly. Yes, American-led NATO is the aggressor here. So, as we stare down the barrel of World War III, shall we then take a look at what the sides will be? It is difficult to figure out exactly what the sides will be. To me, I think they will end up as such. Russia, Brazil, South Africa, India, China, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, Iran, Argentina, and Egypt and North Korea against the USA, EU, UK, Canada, Japan, Israel, Australia, New Zealand, and Germany, and South Korea. Most of, but not all of NATO, as places like France and possibly Germany and Turkey are on the fence. Although being a part of NATO, they are being asked by the people to look at distancing themselves amid an ongoing and severe energy crisis, and Turkey has conflicting arrangements under the BRICS economic alliance that seems to be stronger than NATO's tenuous grasp on power these days. There is some debate about whether or not China would side with Russia, or if India would actually go against China with the USA, and Pakistan, I believe, is with China but against India. This may be a good topic for the comments if anyone has more information here and reasoning as to why or why not. Please comment and let us all know. What's next? Oh yes, Russia has been making phone calls frantically to several countries, including the IAEA, or International Atomic Energy Agency, with claims that they believe to have critical intelligence that Ukraine may be planning a dirty bomb attack as a false flag in Ukraine. Let's face it, at this point Ukraine is the site of a proxy war being funded by the USA and indeed all of the West, as well as us here in New Zealand, also at the expense of the Ukrainian people. It has recently come to light that a New Zealand soldier has been killed in Ukraine, and that we are sending a nurse to act as an army medic. I have seen reports that the USA military has some active soldiers working as mercenaries inside of Ukraine, but also they sent the 101st Airborne Division to add an additional 5,000 troops on the border of Ukraine and add to the already more than 100,000 NATO military personnel currently stationed on the border. Elsewhere in the world, Germany and France's citizens are protesting against NATO and the EU, asking to leave in favour of more liberal trade agreements that serve the locals and their needs instead of crippling them with the backfire and self-harm the sanctions of Russian energy have caused. Droughts are worsening and deepening across the USA, which will cause the USA to further its war agenda. Because they need to lower population or take land and food from another nation to survive, in China more and more places are being locked down. I believe over 200 million people are now in lockdown in China. They also have experienced a hard landing to their financial markets, with stocks crashing dramatically in recent days, and their housing development companies have had large debt defaults. President Xi has said that a forced reunification with Chinese Taiwan is inbound, and that America should not try to deal with China as if it was a big brother to the country. Basically, he's saying, actually, we are bigger and stronger and we can push back harder. Given that they have 300 million active soldiers and no one knows how many nuclear weapons, I think the West would be wise not to poke the dragon, so to speak. In history, countries that rise to global leadership are eventually toppled. It has happened over and over again over the centuries. The last was Britain, which gave way to America. I believe America is in decline and it is the next to fall. What this coming and unfolding and utterly imminent world war is about is who gets to be the next global leader and superpower. Will it be Russia or will it be China? And what will happen to the rest of the nations like us during the transition? Will there be a next global leader at all, or will the global cabal of unelected leaders currently that run the majority of the world, except Russia and China and maybe some of the Middle East, as puppets, hold on to their new world order and successfully implement the Great Reset agenda? I hope not. Recently, in the last day or two, and keep in mind that I had intended to get this video out to you all last week, and as such this was all mostly written a few days ago, but it has come to light that Russia is laying the blame for the Nord Stream gas sabotage at the feet of the British Navy, and also labelling them complicit in the infrastructure attack on the bridge in Crimea. This has prompted the USA to fast-track new nuclear weapons to the UK, I believe to act as a deterrent, but in effect probably in a retaliatory strike. As with infrastructure attacks upon Russia, if they were indeed done as alleged by Russia that the UK and Britain are culpable, then this will lead to a direct engagement by Russia of Britain or the whole of the UK also. The damage done was on such a scale that cannot go unanswered without Russia seeming weak to its own population, which would damage the support for the war moving forward. This is why they say, save face. In some instances like this, to act to save face is to act strong or risk others literally coming for your face. Before we move on here, I want to reiterate the goal of this channel is to help you to prepare and not to incite violence or acts of terror. I believe democracy is preferable to any authoritarian actions. I wish we had a democracy, but I think that ship sailed in about 1971. So we had a democracy from about 47 to 71, but I don't want to ramble too much here. I just want to make sure you understand I'm not advocating anything except getting yourselves ready and prepared to survive what will likely be a turbulent and violent decade to come. On that note, if you are a lawyer or know anyone who is a good lawyer, ask them if it's possible to place yourself in a trust outside of the grasp of things like a draft maybe, and I say that because it's looking like that could be a possibility down the track. Before we move on, I wanted to add here that there is now some social engineering taking place to condition you to look for violent extremists and to prime you to view people who have a differing opinion to you that they could be the new terrorists, and to try to get you to believe that the government is coming for them, is in the public favour essentially. Now, I don't disagree entirely on that, but where black and white gets mixed, then grey areas are harder to define, and how dark grey is actually light black. Right and wrong are easy to define for me. Don't harm others, try to be as self-sufficient as possible, get prepared, defend yourself if necessary. But what I see is social engineering, priming you with the danger of an extremist attack taking place. That is what is happening now in New Zealand, and I'm sure also in other parts around the globe. In New Zealand, that is what these articles on Newshub have been about. This so-called guide titled Ki Mataara Ki Ngā Tohu, or Know the Signs. Though I do not disagree with some parts of this document which I did read, I also see the danger in this. This piece of legislation is to democracy as the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of the Witches, was to the church and women. Only it labels those who do research and use VPNs as potentially signs of being possibly radicalized into a terrorist. It labels anyone who wants to force the government to do something or not do something a sign of being a terrorist. This guide that has been released is frankly appalling. Simply wanting something different than what the government is doing, or protesting like those who rallied against the vaccine mandates, are, under this document, terrorists, and so are most preppers. So then, when or if something happens, they will use it to push through new authoritarian laws, like they did for gun control after the Christchurch tragedy occurred. Honestly, we should have cut our losses at a cavalry, like Danny Filth alluded to. Humans can do so much harm without guns or explosives. They should have never been invented. We didn't need them to hunt. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look around. See the implications of what is being passed, but do not buy into it. It is a very simple sales technique, a very effective one, but a simple one nevertheless. It is no different to someone calling you at dinner time and saying, I can save you $200 a year on your power, then proving it to you with a simple comparison, and then you trusting them enough to switch providers. They make a statement, prove that statement correct, and then use it as justification to enact their plan. Since Guy Fawkes is coming up, maybe we should all watch the movie V for Vendetta and see how many similarities between that movie's premise and where these divisive laws and policies will take us in the here and now are. Guys, it's getting scary out there. What's worse is the more the government enacts these policies to hurt the people, the more likely someone is to go postal and a justification will be had. I hope no one gives them that justification. What's next? Will planning to assemble and a protest be a crime too? Okay, moving on. I want to speak now about cryptocurrency and its role in the coming conflagration. That's hard to say. I want to reiterate that I am not a financial advisor and that I am not giving you financial advice. You must research this and decide for yourself what actions you take. In fact, you should do that with every single aspect of your life, because you most assuredly cannot trust the local media and puppet leaders we currently have. On cryptocurrency, there are two aspects here. There are the originals like Bitcoin, which is decentralized, but the transaction fees and transfer times are problematic. But I would take those over a centralized currency any day. Bitcoin is like digital gold. It is decentralized but not anonymous. As every transaction shows up on the blockchain, everyone can see where money is being sent to and from. XMR or Monero is what Bitcoin was supposed to be, but has largely been shunned as they labelled it an instrument of money laundering, and as it is decentralized like Bitcoin, but unlike Bitcoin, it is also largely anonymous. Next we have the likes of Ethereum, which is decentralized but not anonymous, and has recently moved from proof of work to proof of stake, which to me is the digital equivalent of moving from backing money by gold to backing it with debt and interest, and for that reason I'm really not a fan of ETH. I wanted to touch on XRP, which is touted to be the viable replacement for the SWIFT network and uses a different model than both, but is known as a banking coin. This makes it somewhat a centralized coin, although it is likely to have a large price gain over the next few years, as its current value is primarily tied to its outstanding utility. It is also the downfall of currency as we know it, as if it's adopted, it is looking as if it will become the banker's coin and an intermediary between fiat currencies. But soon those fiat currencies will be replaced with CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, which will be smart contract enabled, and in effect complete and utter digital slavery will ensue. They will control your money and where you can spend it and how frequently you are allowed to buy certain things. If XRP can be used to replace SWIFT and is pegged to a hard asset like gold, then local fiat currencies are pegged to XRP, we could have use of its on-demand liquidity and low-fee international monetary transfers, which would be a good thing. This would allow for the inflation to settle and life to return to somewhat normal, although the inflation we have suffered and is still roughly 20 to 50% to come cannot be unwound or undone. It could be stabilised. The danger here is that if we allow for a central bank digital currency to be pushed through, we have lost and we are slaves. If this happens, it is our civil duty to stop all work and put all efforts towards righting that wrong. Okay, moving on now. Bill Gates in America. By now you know, and it's no secret, that Bill has been buying up land like it's the last Lamington in the bakery. Yes, I like Lamingtons a lot. But he also has come out and allegedly given money, well, it has come out, not he has come out, but he's allegedly given money from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to a lab in Boston, America, which is conducting gain-of-function research on COVID-19. They've developed a strain that has an 80% kill rate. So buckle up. It looks like if this unelected cabal we know as the World Economic Forum doesn't get its way with its great reset slavery plan, remember the saying, you will own nothing and be happy? Straight out of George Orwell's 1984, isn't it? How's that for a double think? But yes, if they don't get their way, they may throw their toys out of the cot and release this COVID variant as well. I will note here that before COVID-19 spread around the world, it was believed to have been silently spreading in China for months. And remember, what happened just a few months before China hosted the military games in China of 2019, Military World Games in Wuhan, to be exact, 18th to 27th October 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is when the virus was released into Wuhan in China. And remember, pandemic, economic crisis, then World War, just the same as it was before the last World Wars, same cycle. I would not be surprised if the virus came from the same lab in Boston, currently doing gain of function research on it, funded by the WEF and Gatesy Boy. Right, we need to stop there for a bit. We need to compose ourselves and strengthen our minds and resolve. If you're watching this now, remember, you are not alone. The majority of people are not against you. The world leaders are puppets, not kings. They are like one machine on a factory's assembly line being told this month to prime the population in your country for CBDC, censorship, political control, etc. Don't ask why and label those who speak out as terrorists. Then we will lend you the money to go and retire off in an off-the-grid bunker somewhere. So what do we need to do in response? Well, we need to tell as many people as we can. Tell them not to give them a reason to enact more draconian laws, but we need to prepare and become more self-sufficient as possible. If ever there was a time to have your bug-out bag ready, your bug-out location sorted, that time is now. And a bunker would be appropriate in this day and age also. A mass awakening will happen, and at that point things will change for the better. But knowing and understanding people do not act like that until such a terrible wrong has been committed fully, it means being patient. It means that this system they are implementing with their grand propaganda machine will come into force and be realized, and it's very unlikely that anything can be done to stop it. So what I want is for you to survive, to teach your children about it, teach them about what happened, teach them why, teach them what came before and what could be again. I do not want you to despair or give up. That would be quite wrong. I want you to step back. I want you to harden yourself and your mind, harden to the point that little things do not bother you. And when you awake in the morning and be at peace, think today is today and I am alive. And all I need to do is eat sometime this week and drink water every day. Beyond that, and I mean this in all seriousness because I have been there, if all you need to do to survive is those two things, you will be stronger for it and less easily manipulated. Now, having been to that point in my life and coming to where I am now with abundance, I do not want to go back there, of course not. I work extremely hard not to go back to that point because I know what it's like, but I'm not afraid of that point. No, I'm not. I want to leave you here on a more positive note. I know it has been dark, but I want to leave you a lasting impression that is not all doom and gloom in your mind. As I narrate this last piece, I want to show you a little of my wilderness and a little of my archery and my gardens. Yes, prepping is what we do, so we do not have to experience that hardship. And lately I've been very busy working on my gardens and getting everything ready, practicing my archery, and as much for my peace of mind and enjoyment as for the practical hunting aspect. I say to you, this coming summer here in New Zealand or winter overseas, whenever or wherever you are, get out there into nature and drink it in. Work each and every day to get prepared, but don't let it consume your life to the point where you are not living your life. Learn a new skill, read a new book. With increased knowledge, you will get increased perspective. Learn to shift your perspective to one that works for you and escape the haze, the fog of war and social engineering that is being thrust upon you. As you have possibly surmised by today's video, that things have been tough during my life, and I have had more than once been face to face with my own death. But you can simply look that death right in the eye, smile into the darkness, knowing that you will fight to the very last and be at peace and persevere. This has been a New Zealand Prepper message telling you not to fear death, but also that you should prepare with a vigour that makes them know that you are not coming anytime soon. And that life is for the living, and we must make what we can in this world in the here and now. I hope you have gotten something out of all this. I hope you see the world more clearly, and that what you see no longer frightens you. If you have liked my video, please give me a like, comment and ask questions, especially if you have something practical you want to know, and subscribe to my channel. I will be here at least twice a month where possible. As you saw from this video, it's a week late, but because of that it's a longer video with more to it. Honestly guys, the research here does take a long time, but I will continue because I believe the perspectives I am giving and the updates, if you haven't seen them elsewhere, are important. Take care, get prepared, and I will see you all in the next video.